Hi, welcome to distinti.com. This is the YouTube channel trailer. My name is Robert Distinti, and this video audience is for everybody. What this site is generally about is a new form of science to replace classical theory. And in support of that, I've got two videos out there. T2, which shows that modern science is obsolete due to a circular definition, which is a complete rot at the foundation. And that humans only have one option for survival, and that's going to break the light barrier, and they're going to have to break it by a factor of 500 or better. If we don't do that, we're pretty much, let's just have a war and get this silly human race over with, because we have no other options. So what I'm doing is providing an alternative to science. I call this science Ethereal Mechanics. It's a dynamic ether model which resolves the problems of the static ether model from antiquity. Now, who am I? I'm an electrical engineer with over 30 years experience. This all started because 20 years ago I asked a question, how do you compute the inductance of an inductor? But I'll get to that in a moment. Okay, but the remainder of this video is a quick overview of ethereal mechanics and provides a table of contents, so different playlists, and show you, what things you can find. And also, there's other playlists that we're going to talk about, which are just fun playlists, like puzzles. So who am I? I'm an electrical engineer with over 30 years experience. 20 years ago, I asked a question that changed my life. How do you compute the inductance of an inductor from field models? Now, an inductor is nothing more than a coil of wire. And here's a fancy inductor made from hard wire. And through simple wood, wire, and glue experiments, I found that the classical EM models are ripe with ambiguity, singularities, omissions, and in many cases, like Maxwell's displacement current over unity. And if you want to follow all that, just check out the Foundation Series playlist, where we go into that in detail. Okay, this resulted in new electromagnetism, which is the first step toward ethereal mechanics. The version 4 is on YouTube. Version 5 is going to be released on the Patreon site in the next coming month or so. And this is the Patreon site. I'll have the link for it. This is new electromagnetism V4. First model is Coulomb's model. I don't say law because scientists inappropriately use the word law because it gives young people the impression that these things were handed to us by God on stone tablets. They're not. These are just empirical models, folks. This is Coulomb's model. All we've did is measure two charged spheres, the distance between them, and how much force we measured. And then we have this big old honking constant of relation. This is empirical data that's been curve fit. It is not a law. It is just an empirical model. And that's what all of new electromagnetism is. These can be derived from F equals Q V cross B. This was inferred from experiments that are missing from the other well-known experiments. And this I went and actually searched, and if you go to the Foundation Series playlist, you'll see how I came up with this very simple experiment with wood, wire, and glue, and found a better model for induction that looks more like F equals MA. Or in the case of engineering, it's usually done F equal minus MA, so that's what that is. It basically says that the inertial reactionary force on an object is its mass times acceleration, and this is mass. Comes out to kilograms. From this you can compute the mass of an electron to a higher degree of precision than is currently measured. And there's a video somewhere on my website, on the YouTube channel for that. Later I used my new electromagnet from my master's thesis to compute printed circuit board trace inductances to a higher precision than can be measured with an adjunct LCR meter. And if you want to take a look at that very long and exhaustive graduate thesis, you can go to this link here. But it's getter. New induction suggests that inertia, which we've been calling mass, we've been improperly calling inertia mass, is simple electromagnetic induction. I just showed that before. In the new electromagnetism hypothetical model of matter, if two inertialess light charges, which we call PreTongs, counter-orbit each other at the speed of light, the forces of new electromagnetism completely cancel. And this is not the only system. There's plenty of systems that do that. This is just the simplest one of all the systems. And if you take two charges of a unit charge, 2 unit charges of the classical electron radius, and you put it into KE, q squared over this radius, and ke is mu over 4 pi, which is 1 times 10 to the minus 7, and you do this calculation, you will get the mass of an electron. And this suggests that leptons are all the same system. Okay, that these aren't different particles because their masses are different. They're different particles because the state of the fundamental system that makes them up is different. These are all the same system, just in different states. Again, there's for the inertia. Okay, and then the hypothetical model of matter, which we're now calling the second order system of PreTongus, became less hypothetical when a recent derivation involving classical energy also converged on the second order system of PreTongus to describe matter. And you can see the new energy paradigm at patreon.com, Ethereal Mechanics, and also some of it is in T2, the trailer video T2 called Popping the Science Bubble. Okay, more advanced second order systems of PreTongus to be released in the near future, which resolves some of the shortcomings of the simpler new electromagnetism model. Now, the new units. Okay, mass is now the Burl, which is in square coulombs per meter. It's really inertia, where the new unit is Burl. Energy is now square ampere meter. Okay, force is going to be just square amps. And we're just abbreviating that with squamps. I thought of naming this squammeters for square amp meters, and all of these things are defined as states of the second order system of PreTongus. So now that we have inertia, well, what about gravity? And if you go to slide 4 from video EMF 006, which is the last video of the foundation series, it shows how ethereal mechanics describes gravity and ether and all the properties of nature. So if we go back to Einstein's principle of equivalent, again, this is slide 4 of EMF 006. Einstein said that accelerating through space at 9.8 meters per second, and you're in a little spaceship and there's no window, so you can't see outside to see what's going on, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference of what you feel inside that spaceship. You wouldn't feel the difference from there to sitting, that thing we're just sitting on the earth. You could not in any way detect the difference. Okay? And so that's how he made a link to say that inertia is similar or equivalent to gravity. Well, I took that one step further and said, well, if in fact you have a medium and that you're traveling through space and accelerating through space at 9.8 meters per second, then new electromagnetism or new induction suggests that you're going to get a force on the second order system of PreTongus that's going to look just like the force of gravity. And therefore, with this second order system of PreTongus is on the Earth, it would get the same effect as if the Earth were consuming ether in such a fashion that ether is accelerating at 9.8 meters per second squared toward the Earth at the surface of the Earth. And that would be a way to unify them. Not just say they're equivalent, but to say they're actually the same thing. So the ramification of the assertion is that massive bodies consume ether. And if the velocity of the ether toward the Earth works out the same as the escape velocity derivation. And this all says that ether flows toward the Earth at 11,000 meters per second at the surface. But it gets better. Because the ether is consumed like a fluid going down a drain, and typical fluids establish an irrotational flow, then there must be a rotational component to the ether. Okay, and from the video EMV 023, we derive what that tangential component should be. So let's do this. Let's apply this. Let's compute the tangential flow of ether about the sun and compare that to the velocities of planets in orbit. And so if you take this equation and you plot it, and that's the dotted line is this equation here, which shows what should be the tangential velocity of the ether about the sun. And the dots here represent the velocities of each of the individual planets, and you can see they fall right into line. The only little difference here is that Pluto and Mercury aren't quite exactly to the line because they're not perfectly circular. They're more into elliptical orbits. And that's probably the case that they've been struck. And what ethereal mechanics says is that all planets will eventually decay to a nice, perfect circular orbit unless, again, their orbits are disturbed. So unlike classical ether, which every physicist has a bone about, the classical ether was assumed to be static, and the Michelson-Morley experiment tried to measure the velocity of the Earth through it and failed. The ethereal mechanics ether model is dynamic, and our tangential velocity with respect to the sun nearly matches that of the ether. See, they tried to fix it saying, well, the Earth drags the ether with it. And I got it again. I always say this a lot. This is one of the rules of acquisition. Humans usually get stuff backwards before they get it right. It's the other way around. The ether is dragging the Earth with it. Okay, so all planetary orbits will eventually decay to circular orbits unless disturbed by a collision or whatnot. And the flagship ether model, a dynamic model where massive objects consume ether, it's the only scientific theory that explains the disk-like shape and behaviors of galaxies and planetary systems. And you can go to EMF 006 of the Foundation series for a general overview of ethereal mechanics. So why does matter consume ether? Well, you got to go see video EMV 021 for the answer. A more detailed explanation of what goes on at the level of the second order system protons will be at the New Energy Paradigm at the Patreon site. And sorry for the color got messed up in my printer. What I'm doing is comparing relativity, quantum mechanics, and ethereal mechanics. So here, inertia, there's really no explanation for inertia in relativity and quantum. They just treat mass as a scalar, which is analogous to inertia. There's no explanation of why matter has inertia. Ethereal mechanics explains why matter has inertia. Gravity. Well, relativity is interesting because relativity has a distorted fabric model, but it results in over-unity, but we're not going to get into that right now. We're just going to say they're trying to explain gravity. But gravity emanates from matter, but they have no model for matter. Okay, which is down here. And then quantum mechanics, complementarily, has lots of particles of scalar quantities for mass, spin, and charge, but then they have really no model for gravity. And so you got this science of the large and the science of the small, and they don't dovetail. They don't work together. Ethereal mechanics describes both the big and the small equally. It's pretty simple. It's so simple even a physicist will be able to figure it out. But they won't believe it because it's so damn simple. It makes pretty much, well, I'm not going to say that. And what about the persistence of matter? Why does matter stick around? Well, relativity has I guess, perpetual motion. They don't really explain why matter is there. It just is. Okay, quantum mechanics, it's perpetual motion too. The model is that the thing spins around forever and ever and ever, and there's no reason why. In ethereal mechanics, protons consume ether to produce stable EM fields. And and this leads to the decay of matter. In the relativity, they have no opinion on the decay of matter. Quantum mechanics, oh, it's a random event. Yeah, it's statistical. We can't understand that. Ethereal mechanics, if you starve matter of ether, matter will decompose, it'll break down. And that's why the cores of planets are hot. And because even though there is no more fissionable materials coming out of lava at volcanoes around the Earth, there's still radioactive decay going on in the center of the Earth, because at the center of the Earth, that big iron ball is very starved of ether, and so iron is actually radioactively decaying. That's the theory that ethereal mechanics says. And so, well, I'm not going to belabor that. I don't want to give it all away here. Energy. Relativity has no explanation. It's just a scalar in an equation. Same with quantum mechanics. Ethereal mechanics is a state of a second-order system of protons. Matter, as it approaches the speed of light, well, relativity just says, well, the mass has to increase and the length has to decrease. Quantum mechanics says the same thing only because relativity says so. In ethereal mechanics, as you start to approach the speed of light, the rotation of the second-order system proton slows according to the time dilation equation, which isn't time. Time isn't dilating. That's the difference. It's the material processes slow down. Okay? And the volume contracts, but it's not isotropic. And because the volume contracts, the inertia increases. But the number of protons doesn't change. In other words, these guys say the mass increases, like more matter is coming from nowhere. That's not what's happening. It's the inertia is increasing because the protons are getting closer together. It's a much more rational explanation than this garbage. Okay, matter as the speed exceeds the speed of light. Well, relativity and quantum mechanics, I don't think knows. Relativity has only a speculation. In ethereal mechanics, we show the magnetic attraction overwhelms the Coulomb repulsion, and the second-order system of PreTongus collapse. It's very simple math. Okay, how about faster-than-light starships? Well, relativity says absolutely not. Okay, the fabric of space-time of relativity is a stationary thing, just like the old ether model. It's fashioned like the old ether model, which was static. I don't think quantum mechanics has an opinion on this. But ethereal mechanics says, no, the ether is dynamic. It's not a stationary thing. And because it's dynamic, you can make a machine or a subspace bubble and drag the ether with you. And I believe that one day, 1,000 times the speed of light is going to be low gear. It's got to be for our own survival. So why am I adding all this crazy stuff about faster-than-light starship travel? Well, my friends, if humanity will perish if the light barrier is not broken by at least a factor of 500. And you can see the trailer video T1 for the reason why. Okay, now we have to remove the rot in the foundation of science. Science is still stuck in definitions that are 300 years old. Even the understanding of what science is horribly misunderstood. And so we need to begin by looking honestly at what science really is. So in science, step 1, humans observe nature. Step 2, they develop mathematical models that mimic what was perceived. There's a lot of people out there that think, ooh, if they get their mathematical models right, that nature's going to do what they say, like it's some kind of Harry Potter novel. It's not. Math is not handed to us by God on stone tablets. It's just a means to mimic what we observe. And we got to stop making something more of it than it really is. And so essentially, science is nothing more than monkey see, monkey do. It's basically an extension of our ability to mimic. But it's a necessary survival thing, and we have to treat it properly with the proper respect and not turn it into this religion where everybody is forbidden from questioning it. Screw that. I question the monkey every day. So what's the problem with science? The problem is the monkey. We humans falsely believe that science is something more like a religion, or that these equations were handed to us by God on stone tablets. And consequently, because of this, there's widespread myths which are crippling scientific advancement. And there was a PhD scientist on a Discovery Channel show. I forgot to get his name. I think it was Dr. David Disney. I haven't been able to see this Discovery Channel show again. And he said the greatest obstacle to science is the illusion that we think we know what we're doing. So what's the solution? Well, what I've done is I've gone through historically and looked at science from historical perspective, and I came up with the new science paradigms. We use a historical demonstration to demonstrate the true nature of scientific progress, what slows us down, how we need to view what we discover and what we think we know. And then we need to improve our scientific terms and jargon, like put a lot less ambiguity. Stop calling everything laws. Oh, the law of gravity. We don't know what the law of gravity. All we have are empirical models. Okay, the Coulomb's model. Oh, we think we know everything about electricity. Coulomb's model is equal to forces Ke, Q1, Q2 over R squared. My friends, this is not a law. It's an empirical model. We call this Coulomb's law. It's not a law. It's just an empirical model. This only says, well, we got one charge here, Q1, another charge here, Q2, separated by distance R, and with this coefficient of relation, arbitrary coefficient relation, we can know what the force between these two charges. This is because we went through and measured a whole bunch, and that we found a mathematical relation that fit. We don't know what emanates from one charge to affect the other. We don't know how fast it travels. We don't know how it couples to the other. We don't know anything. We just have a model that mimics what we observe, and somehow we think we know everything. We don't know squat. And ethereal mechanics is beginning to show that Coulomb's model is really a magnetic field in disguise, based on the behavior of the second-order system of PreTongus. That Coulomb's field is not a real phenomenon. It's synthesized by more fundamental operations. And this we will not see in quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics treats charge as everything that appears at the desktop level exists at the quantum level without change. And that is very naive. Okay, the other thing I developed to help the monkey along is I developed the rules of acquisition. Got the idea from the Ferengi rules of acquisition from Star Trek. There's a lot of rules of acquisition. They're in the fourth edition of them are coming out, which we replace or they supersede the ones you'll find throughout the Ethereal Mechanics on the YouTube site. Okay, and then the fourth, some of the rules of acquisition dispel myths and brain blocks that cause scientific stagnation. Some are tells, like we have the ambiguity tell. It says if you have ambiguity, that means the model of theory that you have is not the most fundamental form, that there's a more deeper understanding. Other types open ways to thinking, and some even get properties of the theory of everything. There's a rule of acquisition 24, which states that the final theory of everything should be devoid of arbitrary constants of relation. And I think we just hit that with the new energy paradigm. We found the solution to eliminate all the arbitrary constants of relation. Because arbitrary constant relations are the hallmark of empirical models, not fundamental understanding. Like, for example, many people, including scientists, believe that if a theory gives correct answer, that the theory is true and irrefutable. Okay, but the very first rule of acquisition, called the correct answer fallacy, is correct answers prove nothing except utility. Because it's possible, okay, with our limited data set in the universe, it's possible that there are infinite number of different models and theories could give you exact same answers of what you see right now. Okay, look at the rules of acquisition. They'll show you examples. In the Foundation series, when considering loops of wire, I found 4 models, very different field models, that gave identically good answers to the inductance of a loop inductor. And I had a tough time trying to figure out which one was the more fundamental. Okay, so just because you have a theory that gives you good answers doesn't mean you have an irrefutable model. All it says is you get a model that mimics nature properly. That's all you can say. And there's a lot of people out there that say, well, you know, when I come to them and say, well, I think I found a problem, they say, well, how could there be a problem with existing theory? If there was, somebody would have said something by now. This is arrogant overconfidence. Because think about it. If you're a trained scientist and you come up with, let's say, a problem to relativity, what's the first thing you're going to say? You're going to say, well, it can't be a problem with relativity because if somebody smarter than me would have seen something by now. And so you're not going to say anything. You're going to sit there and question your data, your experiment. You're even going to question your understanding and your competency. Okay, you are not going to put yourself out there. And even when it comes to the point where you truly believe that you have found a flaw in relativity, you're not going to dare put it out there because you do not want the blowback. Okay, so the belief that somebody should have said something by now is the reason why no one will ever say anything ever. We got to take the stigma away from people coming forward, even if they look like complete idiots. We need to respect, because someday someone's going to come forward with something real. And this silliness, this silly smarter monkey fallacy is one of the worst stagnating forces in science. And rule of acquisition 17 is one of the most powerful I've found so far. It's called the ambiguity tell. And ambiguity in a model of theory indicates that a model or theory is a special case of a more fundamental explanation. And for example, you know, if you say like division by 0. Well, if I take, 5 times 0 is 0, but then I want to divide this result by 0, I can't go back to 5. That's an ambiguity. That says our mathematics is not the most fundamental form. Because if you have a process called multiplication, and that multiplication comes with an invertible function called division, then it's got to work in all cases. If there's cases where it doesn't work, we have flaws in mathematics too. See, my problem, folks, is I can't do my job because the damn physicists and mathematicians aren't doing their job. There's flaws all over the place. Oh, but we don't want to question everything because we don't want to look like a fool. Well, I'm telling you right now, if you don't ask questions, you're the bigger fool. And my math contribution has run into problems of needing meaningful vector division. Okay, in engineering we have cross products and dot products, but we do not have the reciprocal function. This is rule of acquisition 17 bait if I've ever seen it. So in the playlist for Q vectors, I come up with a way to divide vectors and multiply vectors that's invertible. But note that there's going to be a replacement to Q vectors to eliminate the ambiguous Q continuum, because the rule of acquisition is just giving me heartburn over this. And I found a better way to do the vector multiplication division without the ambiguity of the Q continuum. It's really nice, but I still need more work on it. Okay, and that new material that replaces Q vectors will only be released on the Patreon site for Patreon subscribers. Okay, our flagship thing at this site is Ethereal Mechanics. And some of the concepts and theories on the YouTube site are outdated due to new developments. A new Ethereal Mechanics overview video will be available out shortly on the YouTube site. The legacy videos of immediate interest are these ones here. You can go find them in the Ethereal Mechanic playlist. Okay, and so the playlists that are available are the new science paradigms, the rules of acquisition, which there's going to be heavy revision here, addition. The new electromagnetism application series, Railgun project, starts on the second video. Distinti's world, how I see the world differently. And it's in there. There are some demonstrations of new electromagnetism. There's puzzles. There's a puzzles playlist. And how to use your retarded monkey brain. I'm going to be adding to this in the next few months. This, how to use your retarded monkey brain, actually came out of thinking about the rules of acquisition and how our brain is actually the worst problem. It is not a very good. Now maybe my brain is not very good, but at least I'm willing to admit that. Other people are too arrogant to say their brain is stupid. I know my brain is stupid. Okay, but now that I know it's stupid, I know how to work around it. That's the key. So, all future releases except for trailers are going to be posted at the Patreon site, which includes documents and software. That's not true. We're going to have more, we might have some crossover releases. I'm not sure yet. We'll see how that works. But the reason for the Patreon site is I need to do this full time because it's getting hot and heavy, and I need your support. And I believe right now the price, the monthly subscription rate for the Patreon site is $10 a month, but you can give more, I understand. Okay, thank you very much. Please subscribe to the Patreon site to support this important work. Your survival may depend on it. CT1. The Patreon site is patreon.com, Ethereal Mechanics. To get an overview of Ethereal Mechanics, you can see the new channel T0, or go to the last video in the Foundation Series playlist. And please give this video a thumbs up. Let me know what you think. And plaster this link to this video everywhere. Your survival, again, may depend on it. Going viral. Thank you very much.